My fiance wanted an open relationship 3 months before our wedding, so I made her beg me to close it back up. I was finalizing the seating chart at the breakfast bar when Brenda dropped the bomb on me. I think we should open our relationship. She said it without looking up from her phone. We're too tied down to each other. I want to explore. My hand froze. My heart literally stopped beating. You're joking, right? We've been together 5 years, and now you want to explore? She finally looked up, giving me that charming smile that used to melt me. Baby, it's not about you. I just feel like I missed out on experiences in my 20s. Better now than having regrets after we're married, right? I stared at the wedding invitations, the venue deposit receipt, my grandfather's altered suit hanging in our bedroom, but mostly I was thinking about Pete. Pete was my college roommate, and Pete worked on the 4th floor of Brenda's office building. And Pete had been calling me every other week for 2 months to tell me about the man in the gray suit who kept showing up to walk Brenda to lunch. I'd told Pete to keep watching. I told him I wanted to give her the chance to come clean on her own. And here she was, scrolling her phone, asking to legalize what she was already doing in her head. You know what? I said. Fine, let's open it up. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You're the best, babe. This is why I'm marrying you. You're so understanding. I smiled sweetly. Of course, but since we're exploring independence, we should probably stop being so codependent. Really experience that single life you missed out on. She was already mentally swiping through her prospects. Whatever you want, babe. This is going to be so good for us. She kissed me on the cheek and floated to the bedroom with her phone already open to a screen I couldn't see. I sat at the breakfast bar with the seating chart half finished and listened to her hum to herself behind the closed door. I called Pete the second I heard the shower turn on. I told him she'd just asked to open the relationship. Pete went quiet on the other end of the line, then said, "So she's giving herself permission. That's what this is." I told him I knew. I told him I had a plan, but I needed him to keep documenting. He said he'd be on the food court bench tomorrow at noon. I told him to bring the longest lens he owned. The next morning, I started implementing the single life she wanted so badly. When she texted asking what was for dinner, I replied, "I don't know what you're having, but I'm going out with Sam and the guys. Remember, we're exploring independence now." She stared at the message for a long time before she sent back a single thumbs up that I could tell she resented typing. Sam was already at the bar when I got there. I'd known Sam since we were 9 years old. He'd been the best man at his own brother's wedding, and he was going to be the best man at mine. And I sat down on the stool next to him and told him everything Brenda had said in less than 90 seconds. Sam set his beer down and looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I told him I wasn't going to do anything that hadn't already been done to me. I was going to give her the single life she said she wanted, in every direction at once, until she came back asking for the version of us she'd just thrown away. Sam thought about that for a long moment, then clinked his glass against mine. "Then let's give her single life." We sat there for another hour and mapped the next 2 months out on a bar napkin. Friends I'd dropped because Brenda didn't like them. Hobbies I'd shelved because Brenda thought they were a waste of money. The pottery class I'd wanted to take for 3 years. Sam wrote it all down in his blocky engineer's handwriting and slid the napkin into his wallet like it was a treasure map. He looked up at me when he was done. "You sure you don't want to just leave her right now?" he asked. "Show her the photos, pack a bag, end it tonight." I'd thought about it. I'd thought about it on the drive to the bar. The clean version, the surgical version, but there was a piece of me, an honest piece, that wanted her to feel exactly what she'd handed to me. Not for a night, for weeks. Long enough that the version of her who'd asked without looking up from her phone could understand what she'd actually done. Sam nodded once when I told him this. "Just make sure you know when to stop," he said. "Revenge has a half-life. You keep going past it, and it turns into something else." I told him I knew. I wasn't sure I did, but I told him I did. While Brenda sat at home swiping desperately on dating apps, I was reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, joining a pottery class on Tuesdays, and hitting the gym at prime hours when all the hot girls worked out. I bought new shirts. I got a real haircut for the first time in 2 years. I deleted the photo of us from my phone's lock screen and replaced it with a picture of the trail near my parents' cabin that I hadn't been allowed to visit in 3 years because Brenda thought it was boring. The first Tuesday pottery class, my hands shook so hard I ruined 3 pieces of clay before the instructor walked over, put her hand over mine, and showed me how to keep my wrists loose. Her name was Diane. She was 62, and she became the most generous human being I'd ever met. The second Tuesday, I made a passable bowl. By the fourth, I was making mugs. I brought one home and set it on the breakfast bar where Brenda would see it. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and asked who'd made it. "I did," I said. She set it down very carefully like it might shatter and went to the bedroom and closed the door. I came home one night and Brenda was sitting on the couch in pajamas, no makeup, scrolling through her phone with the kind of dead expression you see on people in waiting rooms. "How was your day?" she asked, not even looking up. I told her about the pottery class, the new instructor, the woman in the class who'd asked for my number. I made sure to mention that part casually, like it didn't matter. Brenda's thumb stopped moving on her phone. 2 weeks in, she'd managed exactly 1 coffee date that went nowhere, while I was flourishing. "Why are you going out again?" she complained as I got ready for another night out. The agreement was about sleeping with other people, not abandoning our relationship. I touched up my hair in the mirror. Actually, the agreement was to explore what we missed out on. I missed out on a lot of guys' nights when I was always staying home with you. Don't worry, if I decide to sleep with anyone, you'll be the first to know. Her jaw tightened as she watched me leave in a shirt she'd never seen before. The gym was where I noticed the shift in myself first. I'd been going 3 times a week for years, but always at 6 a.m. when nobody else was there because Brenda thought I looked sweaty and weird in workout clothes. Now I was going at 6 p.m. when the place was packed, and women I'd never have noticed 2 months earlier were noticing me. The trainer offered me a free assessment. 2 of the regulars invited me to a group lift on Saturdays. I started getting compliments on my form from people who had no idea I was engaged because I'd stopped wearing my ring to the gym, then stopped wearing it altogether about a week after that. Brenda didn't notice for 9 days. When she finally did, in the middle of dinner, she set her fork down and said, "Where's your ring?" I shrugged. "I take it off at the gym so I don't bend it on the bars. Must have forgotten to put it back on." Her eyes tracked to my bare hand on the table and stayed there. Meanwhile, Pete kept feeding me updates. The man in the gray suit had a name now. He worked 2 floors above Brenda and managed a vendor account that gave him a reason to drop by her desk. They were having lunch 3 times a week. Sometimes she'd come back to her desk with a flushed face and reapply her lipstick at the corner where she thought nobody could see. Pete sent me a photo from a across the food court. Brenda laughing at something the man said, her hand resting on his forearm like it lived there. Then another, a week later, the two of them walking out of her building together, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward a car I didn't recognize. Then another, then another. Pete started timestamping the photos and labeling them with the location. He sent me a spreadsheet in his methodical engineer's way of every sighting going back 3 months. I saved them all to a folder labeled with a single letter so I'd remember which one without having to look at the name. The pottery class kept getting better. The woman who'd asked for my number turned out to be a labor and delivery nurse named Hannah, who had a laugh that filled the whole studio. We didn't go on dates. I told her honestly, on the third Tuesday, exactly what was happening in my life, from the seating chart to the open relationship to the photos in my phone. Hannah listened without interrupting, set down the bowl she was glazing, and said, "Take my number anyway. Call me when you're actually free." Then she went back to her wheel and didn't bring it up again. I went home that night and told Brenda casually that Hannah had asked me to dinner. I left out the part about declining. Brenda didn't sleep that night either. The real test came at her parents' anniversary dinner. When her father toasted to our upcoming wedding, I cheerfully announced that Brenda had opened our relationship to explore what she'd missed in her 20s. Her father's champagne glass froze at his lips. Brenda tried stopping me. Haha, he's just joking. But I continued. We can both sleep with whoever we want. Brenda says it'll make our marriage stronger. It was her idea after all. The table went silent. Her father stared at her like she'd grown horns while her mother choked on her wine. Her sister, who'd never liked her, made the smallest sound of triumph into her napkin. Her grandmother, who was 90 and had been drifting through dinner only half tracking, suddenly came fully online and said very clearly, "Well, that doesn't sound very Catholic." In the car afterward, Brenda exploded. "Why would you say that? You humiliated me in front of my parents." I checked my hair in the visor mirror. Humiliated? I just told them about our arrangement. You said complete transparency. That meant between us, not announcing it to my family. Oh, so you want to sleep with other men but keep it secret? That sounds like cheating, Brenda. I thought we were being modern and progressive. Her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Her mother called her twice on the drive home. Brenda sent both calls to voicemail. Her father texted me, just me, 3 words that read, "We need to talk." I didn't reply. I'd let him work that one out with his daughter. The next morning, Brenda's sister sent me a single message that said, "Whatever you're doing, keep going." I deleted it without responding, but I saved a screenshot first. 2 weeks later, when Brenda looked more distraught than ever, I made my move. "I'm having drinks with Lila tomorrow night," I said casually over breakfast. Brenda's coffee mug stopped halfway to her mouth. Lila, her best friend from college, the one who looked like a Marvel superhero, the one Brenda had always been weird about me being alone with. Lila? My Lila? Well, she's not your Lila. She's a single woman, and I'm an available man exploring his options. Isn't that what we agreed to? Her face went through 17 shades of red. "You can't do that. She's my best friend." The agreement didn't have any exclusions for friends. I'd already called Lila that morning. I'd told her exactly what Brenda had asked for, word for word, including the part where she'd said it without looking up from her phone. Lila listened in silence on the other end of the line, breathing slow, and when I finished, she said only one thing: what time and where. Lila had been telling me things about Brenda for years, things I'd politely ignored out of love and loyalty. She knew about the guy in college Brenda had cheated with the summer before we got serious. She knew the pattern. She'd warned me at our engagement party, pulled me aside near the cake table and said, "Are you sure?" And I'd waved her off and told her I knew what I was doing. She'd looked at me with so much pity, I'd had to leave the conversation. Now I was calling her back and she didn't say "I told you so." She just asked what time and where. She showed up to the bar in a dress that made the bartender forget how to make change, ordered a martini, and said, "Let her cook." We had 2 drinks at a high top by the window where anyone walking by could see us. I sat close enough to look guilty and far enough to actually not be. Lila laughed at things that weren't funny and tipped her head back to drain her glass at moments when she knew it would look a certain way. We did not touch each other. We did not need to. Pete walked by the window at one point, on his way home from his own thing, and tipped his hat at me through the glass. I came home at 2 a.m. to find Brenda wide awake, pacing the living room. "Did you?" She couldn't even finish the question. I took off my shoes and walked past her toward the bedroom. "I'm not having this conversation with you. You said we get to explore. I'm exploring. Did you sleep with her?" I paused in the bedroom doorway, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "What do you think?" She made a sound like an animal in a trap. I closed the door behind me. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her on the couch crying, then on the phone, then crying again. She tried calling Lila. Lila let it go to voicemail. She tried texting Lila. Lila waited 4 hours and replied only with the words, "You did this." Brenda spent the next 3 days unable to function. She called in sick to work. She stopped eating. She kept her phone in her hand like it might ring with a different answer. Her sister called me directly to ask what was happening, and I told her to ask her sister. Her mother showed up at the apartment one afternoon with a casserole and an expression of confused fury. I let her in, told her Brenda was in the bedroom, and left for the gym. When I came back, the casserole was in the fridge and Brenda's mother was gone, and Brenda was sitting at the breakfast bar with red eyes saying nothing. That night she tried to climb into bed next to me, and I picked up my pillow and went to sleep on the couch, and she didn't follow. The next morning I left for work before she was awake. The morning after that I left a note on the breakfast bar that said only, "Pottery class tonight, don't wait up." She read it standing at the bar in the same pajamas she'd been wearing for 3 days. 1 month before our wedding, Brenda cracked completely. "I want to close our relationship. If you don't agree, I'll cancel the wedding," she announced, trying to sound authoritative. I looked her in the eye, took off my engagement ring, and threw it right at her face. "Sure, go ahead and cancel it." She looked shocked, like she never even expected me to agree. "Oh, and Lila invited me to live with her. Guess I'll be seeing you around." I went straight to our bedroom and pulled a duffel bag out of the closet. I started throwing clothes in, not even folding them, just grabbing handfuls. Brenda followed me to the doorway, shaking, breathing hard. "You're not serious," she screamed. "You're not actually moving in with her." I kept packing, socks, boxers, jeans, my charger. Then her voice changed, got softer, almost sweet, like she was trying to flip a switch back to the version of herself that used to work on me. "Baby, I made a mistake. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. We can pretend this never happened. Please don't go." I zipped the duffel shut and finally turned around. She was on her knees now, actually on her knees on the bedroom floor, hands clasped in front of her like she was was praying. Please, I'll close it. I'll never even look at another man. I love you. I've always loved you. Please. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at her. You want me to close it back up? She nodded so hard I thought her neck would snap. Yes, yes, please. Close it. Pretend I never asked. I let her sit in that for a long moment. Then I pulled out my phone. Before we close anything, I want to show you something. I unlocked it, opened the folder, and slid the phone across the floor to her. The first photo was the food court shot. Brenda's face lit up, her hand on the gray-suited man's arm. She made a sound like she'd been punched. I swiped to the next one. Same man, walking her into the lobby of a hotel 2 blocks from her office at 12:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. They'd come out separately 20 minutes later. The next photo, then the next. Pete had been thorough. Pete had even gotten one of the man kissing her on the cheek outside a parking garage at 6:14 on a Thursday evening, when she'd told me she was working late on a quarterly report. There were 18 photos in the folder. I made her look at all of them. The food court, the hotel lobby, the parking garage, a coffee shop in the West Loop she'd told me she'd never been to, a restaurant on the riverfront she'd told me she went to with her sister, except the photo had no sister in it, only the man in the gray suit cutting into a steak, and Brenda across from him laughing. There was one photo I'd looked at more than any of the others. It was just her face, mid-laugh, in profile, taken through the window of a wine bar at dusk. She looked happier in that photo than she'd looked in any photo I'd taken of her in the last year. I'd stared at that one for a long time before I put my phone in my pocket and went back to whatever I was doing. How long have you had these? She whispered. Pete called me the first time 8 weeks ago, the day after you and I picked the seating chart vendor. I told him to keep watching. I wanted to see if you'd come to me on your own. She started crying. Not the begging cry from earlier, a different kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper, where the lies live. Instead, you asked me to open the relationship, so you could keep doing what you were already doing and call it permission instead of cheating. She tried to speak, but only a wet sound came out. You weren't missing your 20s, Brenda. You were missing a specific man, on a specific floor, 3 lunches a week. And instead of telling me his name, you tried to launder him through an open relationship. She finally found her voice. Barely. I never slept with him. I swear on my life. I know, I said. Pete watched the whole thing. You'd been working up to it, but you hadn't done it yet. That's the only reason I'm still standing in this room at all. I leaned forward. But you would have. The hotel lobby was the last step before the elevator. We both know it. She put her face in her hands. She looked up at me with wet, ruined makeup. The engagement ring on the floor between us next to my phone. So close it, she whispered. Please. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. We can still. Brenda. She stopped. I am not closing anything. There is nothing to close. You can't open something that was already a lie. I picked up my phone off the floor. I left the ring where it lay. I picked up the duffel bag. She crawled forward and grabbed at my ankle, and I lifted my foot, and her hand slid off my shoe like she'd been trying to hold water. One more thing, I said from the doorway. She looked up. I never slept with Lila. We had 2 drinks and she went home alone. I just wanted you to know what it feels like to wonder. Her face went through something I don't have a word for. I walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, down to my car. I drove to Sam's place. Sam opened the door in sweatpants with a controller in one hand and a beer in the other, and he took one look at my face and stepped aside. I dropped the duffel on his living room floor. He handed me the beer without saying anything. We sat on his couch and watched a hockey game neither of us cared about, and at some point Pete showed up with takeout and a folder full of printed photos he said I might want as backup, and the 3 of us ate pad thai out of containers on Sam's coffee table while my phone buzzed itself off the edge of the cushion and onto the floor. I let it ring. Sam picked it up, looked at the screen, looked at me, and turned it face down on the rug. Pete asked if I was going to call her father. I said no. Her father would find out the way he found out about everything, eventually, from her, in pieces, after she'd had time to rewrite it. That wasn't my problem anymore. The wedding deposit was non-refundable. The venue would keep the money and rent the date to someone else. The invitations were still in a box on my counter, unsent, and Sam said he'd come help me burn them in the morning. My grandfather's altered suit was still hanging in the bedroom closet of an apartment I no longer lived in. I'd get it back the same way I'd get the rest of my things back, through Pete's wife, who was friends with Brenda's sister, who'd handle the handoff so I'd never have to see Brenda's face again. Brenda called 14 times that night. She left 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them. Sam made up the spare room with sheets that didn't match and a pillow that smelled like his dog, and it was the best sleep I'd had in months. In the morning, Pete and Sam were already at the counter when I came out. Pete had made eggs. Sam had made coffee. The pottery mug I'd brought to show Brenda months ago was sitting on Sam's drying rack because I'd grabbed it off the breakfast bar on the way out the door. Pete slid a plate in front of me and said, "Welcome back." Sam clinked his coffee mug against my plate in a silent toast. Hannah had texted at 6 in the morning, 3 words, "You free yet?" I read it twice and set the phone face down. Outside the window, somebody's kid was riding a bike up and down the sidewalk. The eggs were too salty. I ate them anyway.